Hello everyone and welcome to another entry in our Community Cast series. In this game we're going to have a showdown between Shetland Apache, who's going to be playing the DAWI with a nice Royal Air Force here. And he's going to be facing off against Onya G, who's playing the Vampire Counts. So guys, let's jump right into this game and take a look at some of the army compositions. So over here for the DAWI, they do appear to have 3 gyrocopters in the front line with the Brimstone gun. So the Brimstone gun variant is more of the single target DPS. Has very good armor piercing and it also does flame attacks. So against the Vampire Counts, I think this is a great pick. It does well against Vargulfs, it can deal with Cryptors, it can deal with the Mortis engine. There's just so many things on the Vampire Counts roster that are weak to fire. So you definitely get a nice little stat boost on those guys. On top of that, he does have a pretty tight formation over here. You can see in the front where he's going to be taking the brunt of the attack. He does have 2 Iron Breakers, so he has the Norgrimling's Iron Breakers, and he does also have some regular Iron Breakers. So these guys are just absolute linebackers, and they're, most of the time when you play the Dwarfs, going to be kind of the last thing standing on the battlefield for you, and they're just, yeah, I think they're one of those regiments renowned that, regardless of the matchup, even if you're in a matchup against like Chaos, right, where you need a ton of armor piercing, you're going to be dealing with like heavy armored infantry, these guys are still just like a good pick. I mean, the blasting charges do a lot of damage, they have pretty good melee attack, and their weapon strength is decent for a defensive type unit. So I definitely really like this pick. 2 Iron Breakers here. On the flanks, he does have some Dwarf Warriors, some Longbeards with great weapons, which definitely some good placement of these guys because he's probably going to be taking the Cav charges over here, and Longbeards with great weapons are actually really good against Cav. They have charge defense against large foes, they have good armor piercing values, and really good defensive stats for a great weapon unit. So I like that he has these guys kind of defending his gun line in the back. He does have the Dragonback Slayers who have anti-large, and something that's really nice about Dragonback Slayers, and a lot of people don't notice this, is that they actually do lower the speed. So when they hit something, it makes them weak to fire damage, which, I mean, it's not terribly pertinent with the Dwarves. The Dwarves have like flame cannons, and I think there's like one other unit that might do fire damage, but yeah, obviously Iron Drakes. So if you want to use an Iron Drake combo, you can use the power of the Dragonback and then roast them with fire, but they also lower speed by 36%, which is pretty strong. So he's got 2 groups of Thunders here, which are a very good choice, and it's going to be one of the only answers he has against like, Vargulfs and things like that. So, you definitely need some tools for shooting down those monstrous units, and Manfred. So that's pretty much it for the DAWI force. They got a cannon here. He has a standard Rune Lord, and for the Rune Lord, he does have the Master Rune Negation, which is 44% ward save, which is huge. And he does also have the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, which is great. Vampire Counts are typically going to bring like Graveguard with great weapons. There's always going to be some good targets for this, so I like that pick. It's going to be very tough for Shetland Apache over here in the front line because the Vampire Counts do have 3 aerial units. They have the Fellbats right here who are going to be chasing Gyros. There's a second group of Fellbats and Manfred, but Manfred takes a huge volley right there. Takes about 7-8% of his HP, which is a really nice pick. The Vampire Counts, I think it was actually like that in tabletop from what I've heard, but the Vampire Counts are very dependent on their lord. If you're able to kill Manfred von Karstein, a lot of these like very low leadership units, like skeletons and zombies, and I mean even the Black Knights all have really poor leadership. So if you can take out Manfred or their lord pretty early, it's definitely very good for the DAWI in that long atrocious fight. He's got Fellbats, he's got Manfred, and for Manfred he does have Winds of Death. Oh man, he's going to see some Winds of Death action. He does also have Raised Dead and Invocation of Nehek. Cool stuff. In the front line, he's got Graveguard with great weapons. He does have a Corpse Cart with an Unholy Lodestone, so this is going to be providing this buff right here. The Vigor Mortis gives 8 melee attack and melee defense. Definitely like it. My one complaint about the Corpse Cart is it's so darn slow. Has 23 move speed, so by the time you get to the enemy, it's going to take so much cannon fire and things like that. But I mean, if you do get it safely into the fight, it can be a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure. 2 Banshees. So this might seem like a little bit of an odd pick to all of you guys, but the Banshees actually have pretty good armor piercing values. You can see they have 190 armor piercing damage and they have 60 move speed. And the Dwarfs do have some magic damage, like High King Thorgrim does magic damage. They have Runes of Wrath and Ruin, but if you don't bring Thorgrim, these Banshees are pretty hard to kill for the DAWI. So he does have these. He's probably going to be trying to assassinate some runesmiths or send them in first to take blasting charges, which I see a lot of people do, and it's very strong. So we'll see how he does. Some zombies over here, probably just more fodder units to take gunfire, because again, Thunders don't really have a good arc of fire, so they have to shoot at whatever's kind of coming at them initially. So perhaps he's going to try and bait some ammunition out of them with zombies. We'll see. Some Black Knights. Black Knights are, I think, a pretty good pick against the Dwarves. Very good for cycle charging. I mean, they're not the best combatants, but nonetheless, if you're just like pressuring the Dwarf back line, that's definitely one of the recipes for success. You can't let them just sit unimpeded. So I like the inclusion of these Black Knights, and I think he had some more. No, he has 2 Vargulfs. So Vargulfs are just an absolute nightmare for the DAWI. Look how angry this bat looks. But the Dragonback Slayers are very good against these guys because, well, I guess the fire thing isn't really pertinent, but they have light armor, and the Dragonback Slayers do have anti-large bonus and very good damage values versus non-armored units. So we'll see how these big fluffy Vargulfs do. So guys, without further ado, let the games begin. So if these gyrocopters really want to find success, Shetland Apache is going to have to really effectively micro them away from these Fellbats, because the Fellbats are so good at tying these things up. I definitely think if you're playing vampire counts against dwarves, always bring like 1 or 2 Felbats at the very least, because it makes it so much harder for the dwarf player to micro, and it's very intensive. But Shetland Apache's doing a pretty good job. He has 2 of the Felbats baited here. This other gyrocopter is shooting at this corpse guard, it looks like, and this other one's going to be shooting at Manfred. So very, very good micro. Looks like he's effectively kind of running all 3 around, you know, getting some effective cannon fire as well. And if he wants, he can also pull back to his main army and get some thunder fire to kind of protect those guys. And you see some nice crossfire shooting at Manfred, and you know, any damage you can do to Manfred, getting him closer to his healing cap, is going to be very, it's going to be very powerful. So you can see Shetland is doing pretty well. This one group is going to be running back, but you can see Onyaji picking up on the bait there. Doesn't want to run into thunder fire, so very well played by Onyaji as well. And he's also chasing this gyrocopter right here, but gyrocopters have 100 armor, so the Felbats obviously have horrid armor piercing value, so they're not going to be able to do the most damage. But Manfred's down to about 80% give or take, so very, very well played henceforth, with these gyrocopters doing a little bit of harass, but also well played kind of screening them off and chasing them down. You know what's funny about Felbats is they actually have 48 melee defense, so if the gyrocopters like try and fight them in melee with their, what is their melee attack, 30? Yeah, it's not going to be the best. So you know, they're trying to run away right now, and he's pretty close to this thunder fire. If he could pull back just a little bit more, these thunders could probably honestly almost one-shot these Felbats, which would be pretty nice. And you can see the cannon fire. It looks to be shooting at some of these Graveguard, but he's definitely gonna, yeah, you can see he just switched it onto the corpse cart right there. Manfred, though, is taking a beating. He's down to like 60%, so he's gonna have to use an invocation from the heck, most likely on just himself, to kind of stay healthy. You can see that these Thunders here are shooting at some of these Felbats, doing some pretty good damage. So the Felbats do pull back. They're probably going to try and swarm on this last gyrocopter, because Manfred's coming in pretty angry right now. How fast are they? 105 to 105, and I know Felbats are a little bit slower. No, they actually have 100, yeah, a tiny bit slower, but it's pretty negligible for sure. So the main forces are advancing right here. The Felbats are just swarming on these gyrocopters. So this is truly the Royal DAWI Air Force doing its thing right now. You can see the cannon doing some, the gyrocopter doing some good work, as well as the support of the cannon on this corpse cart. So you can see Onyaji looks to be kind of pulling it back. Maybe he's going to pull it in the forest and then re-engage it once the main fight starts. We'll see. But vampire counts, their bats swarming all over these gyros. They've done a little bit of damage, but you know, nothing terribly devastating. And the thunder fire, the DAWI gun line is going to protect their flying brothers up there, doing some pretty good work to these Felbats, who are obviously have horrid leadership, so they're going to crumble after like 1 or 2 volleys. But now, guys, this is where things get a little bit wild for the dwarves. Onyaji's coming up and around the flank. Definitely very good tactics here. He's not going to want to run those things in the front line against Ironbreakers. Ironbreakers have charge defense against all, and they have such good melee defense. So the Vargulfs, granted, you know, they would do a little bit of damage because they have heavy AP. He probably wants to pull them through the flank and get into this more sensitive area. But you can see Shetland Apache is adjusting here with his Dragonback Slayers. He's going to be waiting. And all in the meantime, you know, all those thunders and cannons and everything are actually shooting at Manfred and the Felbats. And these gyrocopters are a little bit angry over here, chasing these guys down. And the Vampire Count's forces are getting ready. So a very nice tactic by Onyaji. What he does is he sends in the Banshees first. So the Banshees take that Withering Gunfire, which is going to do absolutely nothing to them. And it's also probably going to bait out some blasting charges. So unfortunately, the blasting charges were on auto fire there, and you see it pretty much does nothing to those guys. So very well played. I really like that tacticianship here. Over here, this is going to be a really pitched point of the battle. The Thunderfire has switched onto the Vargulfs, which I think is a very, very smart tactic. You need to take those out. Everything else here can kind of be dealt with you know, his infantry, but these are some units that need to be gunned down. Like, it's very hard for dwarf infantry to deal with Vargulfs. Up in the air, one of these gyrocopters is being surrounded by all of these Felbats, as well as Manfred von Karstein, taking a little bit of damage, and finally the dwarf kind of Air Force is getting whittled down a little bit. You can see they're getting swarmed and taking a lot of damage. Manfred's probably going to, you know, summon some zombies in the back line, and you can see, I know you guys wanted to see some zombies getting blasting charge. That's always a pretty good time, and honestly, it's not a terrible use, because these are, you know, an annoying fodder unit that can really muck up your front line, but, you know, blasting charges, there's a lot of zombies there to take care of, that's for sure. So Manfred does come over. He appears to be casting a spell. He's probably going to summon some skeletons, actually. So not zombie skeletons right there. And also we get some Black Knights charging in here. We're going to swarm this flank. And that was actually a pretty cool tactic. So what he did is he collapsed on them, kind of knocked them down. And then, I thought he was actually going to try and sneak through this pocket with the great weapons. That would have been pretty fancy business. But it did some good damage to these dwarf warriors, some shock damage. And then also the great weapons are going to follow up here. Zombies in the back line, or skeletons, excuse me, being dealt with by the dwarf warrior auxiliary. And you can see that Shetland Apache is kind of reforming ranks with these dwarf warriors right here. So Manfred is still on the hunt, chasing down the gyrocopters, but all the meantime, he's taking fire from that entire group of thunders, but another group of skeletons are summoned right here. So you can see these dwarf warriors are kind of cleaning up the scraps. It's still going to take him quite a bit of time, and these Dragonback Slayers are going to kind of massacre these skeletons. I actually really like to use Slayers in the back line to deal with fodder units. You know, because one of the most important things in this matchup is keeping your missiles firing, because vampire counts have a lot of monstrous units that are very big and very good against infantry, but man, these Vargulfs are just getting in the back, just smashing on some of these guys. So, you know, Onyaji, he probably knows that basically his key to victory here, he needs to goon those Thunders, because if he goons the Thunders, then those Vargeists, or are they not Vargeists, Vargulfs, then the Vargulfs can basically just run free and just, you know, cycle charge infantry and are going to be very tough to kill, especially with their regeneration. Because dwarf infantry doesn't, you know, hit super hard, so the amount of, you know, DPS like a dwarf warrior or an Ironbreaker is going to put out is not enough to really burn through the regeneration of a Vargulf very effectively. So he definitely knows those Thunders need to go down. You can see the Black Knights have gotten into the back line, but Shetland Apache does have some Dragonback Slayers fighting, and let's see. So he has these guys, yeah, these dwarf warriors are running over here. He does have 49 Thunders right here, and let's see, does he have another group of Thunders still online? I think they might have actually routed off. Yeah, so both of his Thunders are in pretty bad shape, which is going to be very tough. And the Vargulfs are still very healthy. However, Manfred von Karsheim is almost dead. He's incredibly low. So Vargulfs do not have good leadership, so if he's able to kill Manfred, they might have a chance of crumbling them, you know, throughout the course of the battle. Oh, and you can see, despite all this like chaos in the back line, the Dwarf Cannon is still holding resilient. Maybe it's going to start shooting at Manfred. I don't know. We'll see here in a second. Looks like some blasting charges going down to the front line. I think that the Norgrimling's Ironbreakers have a ton of ammunition with blasting charges, and a super nice bomb here in the front line doing massive damage to all of those troops. And you can see that Onyaji does overcast that Invocation from Nehek, which almost kills him actually. So he probably has, I forget what the overcast chance is, isn't it like something like 50%? But anyways, he gets that Invocation from Nehek, which is a really, really nice target. I mean, it's healing everything. It's keeping that Corpse Guard fighting, it's keeping his Grave Guard fighting, but it almost killed Manfred. So Manfred is actually pretty close to crumbling. He's at 13 leadership, and that cannon shoots him out of the sky, so Manfred goes down. So very, very well played by Shetland Apache, staying calm in the heat of combat and, you know, getting that cannon fire despite all this. So Onyaji kind of retaliates, realizing that cannon's online. He's going to pull these Vargulfs back and just kind of start smashing on the back line. So right now, the balance of power, if anything, is slightly favoring the vampire counts, but it's still incredibly close. And the dwarves have about 500 troops to the 150 of the vampire counts. So, man, what a fierce cockfight this is. So as you can see, the Ironbreakers throwing those blasting charges in against those Vargulfs and doing some decent damage actually. You know, at the very least, it hurt their leadership. So maybe one more volley can get them to crumble. No, it doesn't look like it. So the Ironbreaker is probably going to charge in there and, you know, start fighting the good fight. And you can see, unfortunately, this big Vargulf is going to start whomping on these guys. So, you know, the big issue is that he doesn't really have any missiles left. He's got some Thunders over here. Unfortunately, the Black Knights have kind of, you know, surrounded some of these guys, and they're probably going to rout them off the battlefield. And Black Knights, you know, I always thought their stats were worse, but I mean, 24 and 28 and 38, and as far as their stat kind of composition, isn't too bad, I mean, for their cost. So they're going to be able to kind of rout down these Thunders. And you can see Shetland Apache did pull some Dwarf Warriors to kind of save them. He definitely realizes the importance of these Thunders in this situation, but these guys are just too, you know, too isolated here. So they're going to get a little bit of Last Samurai action. There's only, you know, 17 of them, and the Black Knights are unfortunately shielded. It's just bronze shield, so it's not like it's silver, but you know, they're going to get a little bit of fire here. So we'll give you guys a nice cinematic. So, oh, look at this guy. These brave DAWI just shooting in the face of all these monstrosities, but no, they do not get that fire off. They're going to be sent back flying, which is tough. So they're going to, you know, very close to the edge of the battlefield, so they're probably going to rout off here in just a moment. So, oh, for a second I thought they all got killed instantly in that charge, but oh, for some reason he doesn't stay and finish them. I think he wanted to go kind of finish off these Thunders because they were closer to the battlefield. Interesting. Or did these ones break? Oh, they actually just shattered. That's why. Okay. So, yeah, very well played by both players so far. It's an incredibly close game, but, you know, the Banshee's kind of an interesting pick. You know, on paper, I would think they're not very good because the Dwarves, you know, I almost always bring Thorgrim, but, you know, a lot of people bring Rune Lords and, you know, Dwarf Lords and things like that, and it's really hard to kill these guys, you know, without the appropriate magic damage. So right now, these Vargulfs are just trying to goon this Rune Lord out. Rune Lords are very tanky. They have 120 armor and pretty good defensive stats, 45 melee defense. And the Dragonback Slayers are going to kind of scurry in here. And something else, Gyrocopters can knock these Vargulfs around. So you can see they're kind of engaging here. And they have big enough mass to knock them over. So you can see the leadership is actually wavering on these Vargulfs. So man, what a back and forth fight. And all the Dragonback Slayers are kind of chasing here. But the Banshees are still just kind of tanking here. And it looks like they're trying to push through. You can see they're trying to get to this Rune Lord. But all of the other DAWI are kind of shield bashing them and holding them back. And the Dragonback Slayers are also now back as well. So I'd be interested to see how much damage the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin does on a single target. Granted, he's probably going to want to save it on the Black Knights and other things like that are kind of scurrying around. So you can see the Gyrocopters right here kind of shooting these guys down and doing some good work. They're actually crumbling pretty hard right now, and he also does intercept with the Gyrocopter, so he might break the charge. It looks like he kind of broke the charge, but regardless, that ammunition is you know, doing enough work, and down to 10 models, they're definitely going to be crumbled off the battlefield here in just a moment. So the Rune Lord is kind of leading his DAWI throng in here, trying to do some damage against these Banshees, but he also is getting prison shanked, and there's the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin. So it's doing some okay damage. Honestly, it's probably more damage than these infantry are doing, but you know, getting that full surround on the Banshees is very important because, you know, like I said, most Vampire Counts units don't have great leadership, hence one of the better ways to kill them in this type of a situation is just to, you know, wreck their leadership. Unfortunately for the DAWI, Onyaji was able to kind of kill the cannons, so the cannons are completely gone at this point. So he doesn't have that kind of anti-large cannon pressure on these Vargulfs, and the Vargulfs are just going to probably try and goon this Rune Lord out of the army. So you can see they're pushing through right here, and they've almost knocked him out. So he's probably going to charge him one more time, and you can see Onyaji, or excuse me, Shetland Apache, very, very well played with that gyrocopter cycle charging. So who would ever think the Dwarfs would be cycle charging? But they come in here to knock these Banshees out and kind of, keep rear charging them and breaking their leadership. So definitely some great play from both players here. So the Vargulfs coming in and out, they can't let themselves get surrounded because they have very poor leadership. So if they get fully wrapped, these Vargulfs are going to crumble like 100%. I mean, they're already at like 0 leadership here. This other one is like negative 25, and he was surrounded for that second. That's why his leadership tanked. And you guys can also see the gyrocopters did indeed knock him over. So guys, we're going to fast forward a little bit because it's a little bit atrocious kind of killing these Banshees here, but you can see just everything barely getting withered down. The gyrocopters coming in and cycle charging very, very aggressively and double knockdown, knocking down those Vargulfs right there. And it looks like the Rune Lord has indeed died. So the Rune Lord is out of commission. It's basically these DAWI forces and the Norgamling's Ironbreakers, who I think are still fighting here. Let's go ahead and see. So 77 models, they're still steady. So, it's kind of funny, like these armies on paper are very different. Like even without the Lord, the Dwarfs can fight. They have outstanding leadership, but they're against like just such mass. Like the mass of these Vargulfs is just like cleaving these guys. And even though it's only a couple DAWI at a time, it's starting to add up. And a very nice rear charge right there, sending him to negative 16 leadership, and he should start crumbling here in a moment. And I mean, that's probably one of the only ways he's going to be able to deal with these guys. So the Banshees are getting pretty low, and the sustained combat and the crumbling, you can see these Banshees are crumbling. The other ones are probably critical binding, very, very close to crumbling themselves. We have some Dwarf Warriors coming back, some more Dwarf Warriors over here, but it's too bad none of those are Thunderers. But Onyaji did a very, very good job of dealing with those. So the Banshees are offline for the most part. You can see this Banshee right here is crumbling, taking a ton of damage right now, down to 30, 17, and it's gone. So right now he's able to just kind of isolate these Vargulfs. So the balance of power is still favoring the vampire counts, but one or two good attacks, or where the gyrocopters actually connect, could send these guys kind of spiraling downward in terms of their leadership and everything. So that gyrocopter chasing this guy down to critical binding. He's still at 19, but Onyaji realizing that there's some rallying dwarves, and this is definitely a very good tactic. So anytime you're in a very close game like this, and it's just down to the wire, go clean up the rallying units, because if you can get them, it's going to get your opponent that much closer to army losses. And honestly, these Ironbreakers are going to be so tough to crack. I mean, there's still quite a bit of them. Granted, they are exhausted. I think everyone is debilitated, and I'm pretty sure that for the vampire counts, debilitated is the equivalent of exhausted. So still some Dragonback Slayers too, who are actually slowing these guys and allowing some damage to come in. So you can see a charge right here, and this guy actually takes about 100 HP in damage. But the problem for the Dwarves is, like I mentioned earlier, is these guys are not near their healing cap, and the DPS output of the Ironbreakers and Dwarf Warriors is so poor. And it's kind of like that scene in the original King Kong, kind of a story where, King Kong's up on top of the skyscraper and he's like swatting the helicopters. That's kind of what's going on right now. So the gyrocopters are starting to get pretty beat up, and you can see they charge in here, trying to get a little bit of a rear charge, but he immediately pulls back, not wanting to get King Kong. So that would actually be a pretty good thumbnail for this game if I can remember, but kind of have a little bit of I have trouble remembering things. I don't know. I guess just too much useless information. But the forces are continuing to chase these Var guys down, or these Vargulfs, and it's just such a wild, close fight. This Vargulf right here is getting incredibly low, but it looks like the DAWI forces are starting to buckle. The Norgamling's Ironbreakers are the only ones fighting. They're chasing these guys down. Both of these Vargulfs are very, very low, their leadership, but it looks like that's going to be all she wrote. And that was definitely a valiant defeat. Extremely close. So honestly, I think kind of the deciding factor of that game was the fact that the Vargulfs and the vampire counts in general were able to kill that missile line. If the Thunders had been, kind of secured towards the end of the game, and they had been shooting, and then basically what would have then happened is, the Vargulfs would have had to commit to an engagement, chase the Thunders. They would have been surrounded by infantry, and if they tried to run, they would be shot by Thunders. So that was kind of ultimately, in my opinion, just the deciding factor of the game, but it was incredibly close. Shetland Apache had some outstanding micro with those gyrocopters flying in circles around the Fellbats, all meanwhile shooting high-value targets and take out Manfred. It was pretty impeccable for sure. I mean, both Shetland and Onyaji are outstanding players, so very well played to both players. It was a lot of fun. Look forward to casting their games in the future, and hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed this one. Have an excellent night, guys, and take care.